I do have a speaker. Do you want it or you don't want it?
Sure.
Sure,
You
you can
do
hear,
want
can
it.
hear
Okay,
better.
so I'm gonna use the speaker. Y'all know my name now. I'm a history nerd. My ex-husband used to roll his eyes when I started in on things with my history nerd friends, like some of my friends here. And we really get into local history, and it's wonderful because it's up to us to preserve the past so we can move into the future with wonderful memories. We have so many legacies to uphold here in our lovely region. But I'm a member of the Princeton Historical Society, the Dartford Historical Society in Green Lake, the Ripon Historical Society, and the Berlin Historical Society. I raised my children in Ripon, and I also lived on Green Lake, and I now live in Berlin in an 1859 house, so I call myself a regional historian. I do presentations in Ripon. I write Now and Then in Ripon, which is a weekly column in the Ripon Commonwealth Press. Pretty labor intensive, but I love doing it. I do a lot of presentations in the Ripon area. I docent on the Heidel House Escapade. Every other Sunday, we give Captain Mike a break. I think a lot of you all know Captain Mike because he's here from Princeton. He liked to go to church every other Sunday, so I give him a break, and I fill in every other Sunday with Captain Bob. So that's how I get my Green Lake history in. I do presentations like this around in the area. I sort of do a little of everything, whatever anybody asks me for. So today we're talking about my Aunt Ella, and I have not given this presentation in a long time. Oh, and before I go into Aunt Ella, I want to introduce my friend Joe Walker. Joe is on the Fairwater Historical Society Board and the Ripon Historical Society Board. Joe's an expert on historical photography, and he just donated a couple photographs to the Princeton Historical Society. So if you need any help with photographs, Joe's your man, right, Joe? Yeah. Anyway, I want to talk about my Aunt Ella. This is my Aunt Ella. This is one of her signed pitch cards. I have several of these. If you try to buy one today, this is up for sale on eBay for $80. So they're a little bit expensive these days. But when I was about 13 years old, for some reason my Aunt Martha decided to give me everything of my Aunt Ella's. Now, why she decided to give a 13-year-old everything she had of her sister Ella's, I literally have no idea. But I've kept that for years and preserved it for years. And it is in my will, when I pass away, everything goes down to Baraboo. And at this point, I'm thinking I'm going to take it down to the Circusville Museum before I die, because I don't trust my kids.
We just came from Baraboo.
Did you really?
Yeah, we just came from the Circus Museum.
Oh, it's a
Never
great-
been there before, it was great.
Oh,
We
it's
had
a great, great place. But anyway, this is my Aunt Ella. Her name was Ella Mills in the circus, but it's Ella Grahn Milbauer was her name. And she was billed as 586 pounds of feminine charm. So I made a typo here. She was born in 1899, not 1999, and she passed away in 1964. In 1964, I was a first grader when she passed. So I have vivid memories of my Aunt Ella because I was of a young, impressionable age. She was the very last of the Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey circus sideshow fat ladies. She replaced Alice from Dallas. Alice from Dallas weighed 685 pounds, and she died in 1955. So they were looking to replace their fat lady. She started with Ringlings in the 1956 season, and that was the last season that the Ringlings were underneath the big top tents. They had a very bad season that year. A storm came and blew away and ruined their big top. They had problems with roustabouts putting up tents and taking them down. It was just all kinds of personnel problems. Everything just went wrong in the summer of 1956. The Ringlings closed their big top show down in July of that year and brought it back in. And next year when they opened up, they were never performed underneath the big top again. They went into auditoriums. So my aunt can claim that she was the last fat lady under the big top for the Ringlings. After that, she always opened for them at Madison Square Gardens for their opening. They only used the sideshow for their opening at Madison Square Garden, and then the sideshow did not come with them. anyplace else to any of the other auditoriums. So she was still the Ringling Brother, Barnum Bailey Fat Lady, but that was only once during the following seasons. And then she worked for other circuses and other sideshows. So this would be how she was billed, and you can see here they have her as a blonde. I have no idea why, because she had dark hair. But she was billed as 586 pounds of feminine charm. This is May 1956 issue of the Baltimore Evening Sun mentioned her and reported, the barker outside the sideshow cried, if you wanted to hug her, it would take 4 men to do the job. And the sideshow barkers, which were called the talkers to circus people, used to shout, see the woman who eats 3 gallons of ice cream in one sitting. So the talker would be outside trying to get people to pay their money to come inside the sideshow tent to see the performers. Now, my Uncle Bob, who my Aunt Ella was married to, that was her second marriage, was 20 years older than her. And he traveled with her in the circus, so they gave him the job of taking the tickets at the door. So Uncle Bob was involved in the circus. He was the sideshow ticket taker. And I think he must have sold tickets too. They sold for, I think, a quarter and then 50 cents a piece because he had one of those change things. We're not sure if he used that in his regular job or at the sideshow, but boy, when we were kids, we liked to play with that.
Yeah, no doubt.
So the reason this is important to our area is my Aunt Ella actually came from Montello, which you know is just down the road from her. So her maternal great-grandparents immigrated to America in 1853, and her paternal great-grandparents in 1856, and they settled near Montello. Now they were Prussian, which is now Poland, and a lot of, as you know, Prussians settled in this area of the country. It was very sandy soil, they knew how to farm it, they were comfortable here, so that's where they ended up here. Her maternal grandparents married in 1857 and they moved to Fall Creek. And her paternal grandfather was the sheriff from Marquette County. So they were well-known people. The family was Masons, and if you go to where they're buried in the Montello Cemetery, you can see the Masonic symbols on both the elderly Grahn side of the family and the younger Grahn side of the family. They were all Masons. Ella was the oldest of 7 siblings. So her mother died of a stroke in 1926. So by this time, Ella was 27 years old, so she was the matriarch of the family at that point. My father, this is my adoptive father, I was adopted. My adoptive father was 7 at the time his mother died, so he was farmed out to an uncle. So it seemed like when they were together, if Aunt Ella was around, or my Aunt Martha, they were sort of in charge of the family. So it was very sad. They did get split up between several households, and the mother was not around to take care of them. This is my Aunt Ella's confirmation picture right here, and she was confirmed at St. John's Lutheran Church in Montello. They were Lutherans, like a lot of Prussians were. And then the year that she was confirmed, which would have been 8th grade, they moved to Lawrence, which is just west of Westfield. So a lot of people are very familiar. It's a very small burg. It's almost like a ghost community. There's only a couple buildings left there. The school census for 1917 shows Aunt Ella as an 18-year-old. We think she could have graduated from her one-room schoolhouse. We can't confirm that she graduated or not. At that point, a lot of people started working at a very young age to help support the family and support themselves, so we're not sure. The rest of the brothers and sisters, the other 6, did graduate from Westfield High School. So this is my Uncle Art, which would be the oldest brother. My Aunt Martha, who's my favorite aunt. My Aunt Ella. This is an aunt that I never met because she died well before I was born. And this is my adoptive brother, or father, Ralph. He was a high voltage electrician for the Power and Light in Berlin. So he knew a lot of people in this area because he'd come out to rehook electricity, like at a farmer's place or anybody that was having issues. my favorite part about having him as a high voltage electrician is every time the carnival came to town, he'd hook the carnival up for electricity, and they would give him a free string of tickets for the rides. And my brother didn't like to go on the carnival rides, so I got to use up all the tickets myself. But anyway, in the early 1920s, Aunt Ella's father, Bill Grahn, there were several William Grahns, but this is one William Grahn, he ran the Lawrence store. And there's a book called Places and Faces of Marquette County, and it reads in that book, quote, "It was a lively establishment. Like many stores of its day, it carried a line of general merchandise, everything in the household and hardware lines and all manner of groceries, and there was a saloon in the back. The second floor featured a hall with a stage and an old square piano." Now, I have been told that my grandmother did all the work because Bill was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
This makes total sense to me because my father and all my uncles were alcoholics. Some reformed, some not. So they like to drink, party, sing, and have a good time. So this hall comes up in a lot of my family's memories where they were just singing and playing piano and just having a great time. My Aunt Martha loved to sing and my Aunt Ella just adored singing. So it sort of like runs in that whole family where they just wanted to have a good time, and poor suffering mother had to do all the work. So tracking my Aunt Ella, the 1920 census lists her as working with a family. She's a servant for a private family. Then she was a cook at a hotel in Waupun. She did get married in 1926, but by 1930 she was divorced. She was a matron at the industrial home and a lodger at Tachita near Fond du Lac. She did not like that work. I guess my aunt said that she was watching some of the prisoners hoeing and somebody threw a snake at her, and that was the end of her working at Tachita. She did own a dress shop in Waupun for a short time, and I'm thinking that's around 1931-32, and she was a professional seamstress, as was my mother, and which would be a sister-in-law and my aunt, which is a sister-in-law and my other aunt. So everybody could sew in that family. She married Robert Milbauer in 1932, and he was a streetcar conductor on the Milwaukee Electric Railroad and Transport Company for 40 years. He retired in 1945 at age 64. Now this is sort of, I think, important to this whole story because she was married to a man that had employment during the Great Depression, basically. She was getting food. She really didn't have to work. She worked as a seamstress in Milwaukee, taking in jobs as she wanted to. She could sort of sit around, sew, crochet, do whatever she wanted, and she was being fed. And my Uncle Bob was too old to go to war, and all the men were gone, so of course he had active employment as a streetcar conductor. When the men came home from World War II, of course he retired to give up his job for one of the GIs coming home. So it makes, perfect sense as far as timing. So they moved out of Milwaukee, they sold their house, and where did they move? They moved outside of Westfield, sort of between Westfield and Lawrence, sort of where that Haystack restaurant was, if anybody's been out to the Haystack. So they were out there. And they also purchased a travel trailer, and we spent the winter traveling around the southern states. Now my aunt was not that old when Uncle Bob retired, but he was 20 years older than her. So she just retired with him, and off they went doing what they wanted to do. So there's a huge debate. How did she get in the circus? Obviously they were traveling around the country in their travel trailer. Somebody must have saw her and said, "Hey, you want a job in the circus?" And the circus tends to exaggerate everything, and we're not quite sure, but some things make sense to me. The first one is family friends said that she was on a beach in Sarasota, Florida, when a circus recruiter came up to her and said, "Hey, you want the job as the fat lady?" That could be a possibility. My Aunt Martha always thought she was on the streets in Texas, and somebody just walked up to her and said, "Do you want to be the fat lady in the circus?" My mother said she was in Hot Springs, Arkansas, taking in the waters to lose weight when she was recruited by a circus recruiter. I tend to believe that my mother was correct. She was in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And the reason I believe this is this picture is from 1959. It was taken at the Hot Springs Showmen's Association building. It was a meeting hall and entertainment center for carnival and circus folk. So she's probably in Hot Springs, Arkansas, taking on the waters to lose weight. Somebody that's a recruiter that I guess a lot of carnival people, a lot of circus people would actually hang out winters in Hot Springs, Arkansas. That was just a gathering point. I can just see her being recruited there because there are a lot of that type of folk that hung out in Hot Springs. So anyway, this is my aunt at that tacky party. I was able to track it down, and this Showman's Association building is still there today. I sent this picture off to them and they confirmed, yes, this is where it was taken. So I'm just thinking this is exactly where my aunt was recruited to become a circus fat lady. So my family sort of laughs, and my mom always said that the minute she was recruited to be a circus fat lady, the refrigerator door never closed. That gave her the license to eat and eat and eat more, which I wish somebody would give me that license. No one actually cared, but yeah. So that was the story about Aunt Ella. So the circus hype again. It's hard to prove a lot of things in the circus because of the way circus hypes things up. So it's always the biggest, the most dangerous, the most awe-inspiring, never attempted before, and from the deepest, darkest parts of Africa. So how do you get to the real story? It's a little bit hard. I was told as a child that a family of circus midgets came to Westfield to measure my aunt and sew her dresses. I thought that was the greatest story, because can you imagine a bunch of little people coming to Westfield and measuring a fat lady?
Yeah, that's awesome.
I mean, that is the best. I believed that for years. And it was in all the newspaper articles how this family of midgets came to Westfield. Well, you know, Aunt Ella, as well as her sisters and sister-in-laws, were all professional seamstresses. My mother and my aunt worked at Truesdell's in Berlin sewing the linings on fur coats. My mother would cut out silk linings without a pattern and sew them into fur coats. You'd have to be a pretty good seamstress to be able to do that. So they were very, very good seamstresses. My Aunt Martha, her sister, owned a store called Wiggs Dress Shop in Portage, if anybody remembers that, years ago. And she would do her own alterations, and my Aunt Ella would help her do the alterations. Just as a side note there, I was 41 or 42 years old with my first, I had 2 children by that time, and my Aunt Martha was quite elderly, and she whispered to me, "Do you know how I made all my money?" I guess it was because the women of the evening from the Wisconsin Dells would come into the doctor once a week to get checked for diseases and whatnot. And that was across the street from my aunt's dress shop, Luke's dress shop. So when they finished up at the doctor, they'd walk across the street to buy cocktail dresses so they could entertain the gentlemen at the Dells. So my aunt told me that that's how she made all of her money, is selling cocktail dresses to the ladies of the evening. So anyway, my aunt, it turns out, sewed her own dresses, and she used to crochet, and if you can notice here, she's got crocheted squares on her dress. And the Oshkosh Northwestern said that Ella's gowns make quite an appearance, there's lots to them. Well, yeah, everybody said she would make them bigger on purpose to make her look fatter.
Sure.
So she, I don't know how many yards she used, other fat ladies used about 12 yards of fabric per dress. I'm assuming my aunt was the same way, and she sewed them with a lot of gatherings across the bus line to make her look even larger. Now the crazy story about this is I remember having some of these dresses in the basement of my house when I was a little girl, because my aunt thought that my mom as a seamstress could cut them apart and make me dance dresses. Instead, my brother and I put them on top of the card table and used the card table like a tent with my aunt's circus dresses on the top. So that is what I remember as a child. But after she did retire to Montello, some of those dresses did go down to Baraboo to the Circus World Museum, and some of them have been preserved down there. I have no idea what happened to the ones that were in the basement of my house. I just remember making tents out of them.
That's funny.
So these are pictures of my aunt before she became a fat lady. I've talked to a lot of people from Westfield about my aunt, and the thing that they remember the most about her when she was living in Westfield before she left in '56 to become the fat lady is her breasts were so big, she'd get in her car and the horn would honk. And so my cousin's husband said, "Oh, so that's why they call them honkers." I thought that was cute. So eventually my dad and the other siblings disconnected the horn on her car so she wouldn't be driving around honking it all the time. But she was so heavy that she could not drive a car in the normal way. So she had this station wagon, which my dad inherited after she died. So I remember that station wagon. And what my uncles and my dad did is they took, remember how they had bench seats? Mm-hmm. So they took the bench seat, they took it off the track, and they put it against the back seat. So she had a lot of room for herself. And then they built up the gas and the brake pedal. Okay, so she would sort of drive with her arms straight out, her legs straight out, and she would drive the car because my uncle was 20 years older than her. So think at 56 years old, basically, when she joined the circus, my uncle was then 76 years old, so my aunt did all of the driving. So I vividly remember that car because my dad used it for an ice fishing car after my aunt died in 1964. So the car was fitted for her size. Now when I started researching my aunt as an adult, I started talking to some pretty elderly people that were friends with her. One of them was Mrs. Wandery. They owned Wandery's store and campground on Lawrence Lake. I don't know if anybody was familiar with that, but Mrs. Wandery went to school with my aunt, so they were very old friends. And Mrs. Wandery told me the story of my aunt first leaving in 1956 to go down to join the circus because she had to go down to Florida, join the circus there, and then the circus train left from Florida out on their agenda. So Mrs. Wandery said, "Oh yes, they were driving south, and in those days you could just pull over on the side of the road and stay in a wayside," because she was pulling a travel trailer, their travel trailer. So Mrs. Wandery said that in the middle of night, a man broke into their trailer and tried to rob them, and my aunt pushed the man down and sat on him. Now the rest of the story is I guess my aunt would get very hot because she was very large, and it was hard for her to get clothes on and off, so she slept in the nude. And my uncle, somehow they got the sheriff out there, and when the sheriff arrived, my aunt, the fat lady, was sitting on the robber, and he's screaming, "Let me up!" So at first I thought, oh my God, Mrs. Wandery is like 94 or 6 or something. When I was talking to her, this can't be
walked into the wrong
a
trailer
true
with that.
story, right?
Oh my gosh.
So I went to my cousin Zilpha, who's 20 years older than me, and I said, "Hey Zilpha, was this like a true story?" She goes, "Oh yeah, that really happened." So I wish that police reports were digitized from 1956 because I would just love to see that police report, "Fat lady sits on robber."
Nude.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Oh, that's great.
yeah, isn't that a great picture?
Yeah, that's
So my aunt left in March of 1956, and she was under the canvas of the Ringling Brother Barnum and Bailey Circus Sideshow. They had 17 attractions in the sideshow. There's a 50-cent entry fee, and again, my uncle was the one taking the tickets at the door. But the season was over early by July 17th because of the issues. Then she opened at Madison Square Garden, but she was with other sideshows. And what I found out is the circuses do not have records on these sideshows because there was an organizer that organized the sideshow and then subcontracted to the circus. So most of those sideshow records have been lost because there was only a contractor to the various circuses. So other known sideshows and owners, I've listed a few here. They were all over. My aunt was with all of those. One of the last ones she was with was the Clyde Beatty Cole Brothers Circus. But she was, I think that was her last one, but she was with several sideshows. And here are some of her sideshow performer friends. She said all she needed to do is basically sit there and she'd show off her big legs. And She used to wear crowns and big fans in her hair, and my Aunt Martha always said that she did that because she hoped people would look at her face and not her fat body. So she had a very large personality. My Grahn family, some of them had very large personalities, laughed, fun, liked to drink, party, sing. My aunts were always singing. This Aunt Ella loved to sing. So I mean, it was just, so I think she just had a lot of fun there. Although I think there was some hurt involved, because when she was heavy before she went into the circus, my uncles could be mean because they were alcoholics. And they said to her, "Why don't you eat some more, Ella, so you can go to so you can be in the circus." So I'm sure there was hurt there too,
Sure.
being that size.
Sure.
But she was accepted by her sideshow friends, and it seemed like she enjoyed it. And there was some records of her being very kind to some young children that came to visit her, and so she must have had some enjoyment out of doing that job. So these are my aunt's pitch cards. A pitch card is something that you can sell. So you would pay your admission to get into the sideshow, and that of course would go to the sideshow owner, and he would split some of the profits with the sideshow people, the performers. But they needed to make more money, so they sold pitch cards. So these are proofs for my aunt's pitch cards. These were taken in Arkansas, or no, that's in Sarasota, Florida. These were done. And she picked out which one she wanted, and then they made up these little cards, and you could buy them for $0.10 a piece, and then she would sign them or write your name on it, you know, just like a celebrity signing something. And so she sold those, and so my Aunt Martha said that that's how she made most of the money in the sideshow, is having the side business of selling pitch cards. So when I actually received all of my aunt's things from my Aunt Martha, all her sideshow things, she had probably 60 pitch cards of some of the other sideshow performers of that era. So I did take those and I gave those to Baraboo right away. I just thought that they needed to be at Circus World Museum and preserved. They were not of my aunt. Most of them were signed. A lot of them said Ella and Bob, love CeeLo the Seal Man, or, you know, so they were written on, so they had provenance. We know who they were written to and who they were written from. So those were all donated a number of years ago down to the Circus World Museum in Baraboo. I do have signed pitch cards of my aunt. I'm keeping those until I die or I decide to give them to Baraboo. But if you look for them online, and Joe's really good about searching down historic photographs, you'll have to see if you can find some of my aunt. They're selling between $60 and $80 for a small pitch card. So they are valuable.
I should say. One of a kind.
So, you know, why a sideshow? Here's a negative, a printed negative of some of the sideshow performers. You can see my aunt up here. You know, things are different today. People did not think that phrase was negative to say a sideshow freak. People that were unusual were exhibited, and it at one point was the only way some of these people could actually make money, and they could support their families by exhibiting themselves. It's been going on for years and years and years. A lot of times the family members were very proud of their family being in a sideshow or a freak show, because they were family members. So this was normal at one time, but think, my aunt is now in the circus in the late 50s into the early 60s. And we started realizing this is not the way we treat people. We don't laugh at people that are heavy. We don't laugh at people that were born without their limbs. The other thing is think of the tattooed lady. You can just go to Hy-Vee and Ripon now and buy groceries, and you're going to see the tattooed lady. You know, that's not a big deal anymore. Think of the fat lady. At this point, my aunt was 600 pounds. Well, geez, I could go to probably any buffet today and find a 600-pound lady. It's more acceptable. We see it all the time. It's not something that we do need to go to a show to see these people. So it was becoming unacceptable to laugh at people or to show people. So sideshows, of course, are not prevalent anymore, just because we realize this is not the way that we treat people. Everybody's the same and should be accepted and honored for who they are. But at that time, you know, it was a natural that my aunt ended her career in '64, just because that was sort of the start at the very end of you know, what would you call the freak show or the sideshows. It's just not acceptable today. What do I think freak shows or sideshows are today? I think they're TV. I don't know how many of you have watched the show Little People on TV. Or, you know, there's so many shows about, you know, these 1,000-pound twins that are losing weight, you know. So I really think that TV is now the new freak show, that we're watching unusual people. We're seeing documentaries about people that are missing their limbs or whatever. So our freak show has sort of turned into be the media today. So we're still looking at people that are unusual from us, but in a totally different light.
That's right.
This was the 1959 Charlie Hodges sideshow. So Charlie Hodges would take his sideshow different places. Sometimes they'd be exhibiting on their own, sometimes they'd be with a circus, so they've sort of traveled all over. And of course, my aunt was driving her car like this, with the horn disconnected, pulling a travel trailer that she and my uncle stayed in.
Crazy.
So I think it's quite funny because they always called the fat lady the fat girl. It was always like, Dolly Dimples was a fat lady. For some reason, they gave them titles that were sort of had to do with little girls. I don't know why, I think that's a little crazy. But here's some additional pictures of my aunt. You can say, here's the fat girl here. And I love this picture up here because look at the face on these two little kids.
Yeah,
It's
they don't look
like-
too happy.
They're not too happy. So I have to tell you, my brother was afraid of my aunt. He thought if he kissed her, he would get fat, just like her. One time she offered us a circus trampoline if we would both kiss her, and I did, and he wouldn't. So when I got married, my husband immediately asked me, he goes, is she your adoptive aunt? And I said yes. It was like he was afraid that he would wake up someday in bed and I would be 600 You know, but no, I'm adopted. I'm not genetically related to my Aunt Ella. However, there are a lot of people in this area that are related to my Aunt Ella, and I know they're cousins of mine because they remember her. And I don't know if any of you knew Farmer Grahn in Marquezan. Did you know Farmer Grahn?
I know of them.
Yeah, he was very large, and he was a cousin. There's somebody else I know from Green Lake, he's very large, he is a cousin. My cousin Zelfa was 20 years older than me, she could have been the fat lady herself. So yes, I think it ran in their genes. Some of them are very heavy set, and so it's just funny. If you hear my last name of Grahn, it's a little bit unusual, but there's a lot of Grahns in Ripon, Green Lake, sort of over into that Montello, Westfield area, and they always are asking, you know, is the fat lady related to me? So the last sideshow my aunt was in was the Cole Brothers Clyde Baby Circus during their 1961 season, and this was them taken in Philadelphia. It's not the best of pictures, but you can see them standing outside the sideshow tent. Those smaller circuses were still in tents and still traveling around America, so, you know, so she's only in the circus 5 years. So you're wondering, well, why? Like, why would somebody be in the circus? Well, first of all, I want you to know that Wisconsin is known